So let's talk to someone who's organizing and dealing with the esports side of things. And that's exactly what we have right now. Whalen Rozelle, aka Magus. He is the director of esports on the Riot Games global esports team. And Valorant is on his plate. Lots of questions to ask you, sir, but thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We
Marathon stream you guys are on.
I love it. It's amazing. I love that we're doing this in advance of the launch. We have so much to dive into. This is like the most comprehensive way to get people ready, right? To whether they were part of the closed beta or they're trying it for the first time tomorrow. After watching this, you can't not be excited to play, right?
Can't wait to play again. This weekend was I really could have used a little bit of Valorant in my life this weekend, so I'm excited to play again.
You didn't have any access either, huh? So like everyone, even Riot employees, were shut out.
Play like a player, you just have to experience it together.
Fair enough. So anyone in the chat, if you have any questions, this is the gentleman right here that is dealing with esports as it pertains to Valorant. You got any questions? Throw them in the chat. I know I got lots of questions. Let's start here, though. Just the tournaments that we saw in the closed beta. We saw a lot. And in fact, Anna and Jay-Z said that they actually saw more than they thought that they anticipated, right? Like there were a lot of tournaments that went on, whether it was our tournament, T1, etc., Twitch Rivals as well. Like, what did you take away from the competitions that you saw during the closed beta?
We were overwhelmed, but I apologize for any kind of like noise upstairs. It's the challenge of working from home. There's like
it's all good.
There's 2 kids running around. There might be some screaming. But anyways, we were overwhelmed by just the amount of energy and excitement around Valorant, and it certainly came at us a lot faster than we expected. I think there's somewhere over 100 events that we sort of were quickly to like approve and make sure they got a license. But yeah, it was just really cool to see the variety and the different types of events, right, from competitive events to merit-based ones, streamer ones, and like some clever twists on like the players from different backgrounds. It was just super cool to see. We are in this slow build mode, but yeah, like the wave and the overwhelming success of beta is certainly something that hit esports as well.
How has it been planning this? I know that the sentiment right now is for, at least on the competitive side of things, to just wait and see how things shake out and then make an official entry, not on day one, but later on. So how has it been planning and organizing that from behind the scenes?
It's a bit tough too, because we want to stay true to the strategy of like, let's learn, let's let the community develop, let's put tools into their hands over time, and let's let Valorant find its voice. But at the same time, there's a lot of pressure to have more events, have bigger events, and you sort of have to juggle the two, right? You have to be able to address the short term, but also plan for the long term.
So as we come into the launch, a lot of people, we're seeing a lot of orgs sign players. We just talked with Joe Marsh, who's the CEO of T1, and he had an interesting insight about how he will approach the next year at least. He's going to have multiple teams, at least 2 teams, one in North America and one in South Korea, which is an interesting strategy. Those teams are going to run concurrently, at least until something is said, right? Like, what do you make of the strategies that orgs are taking in terms of the immediate future of Valorant competitive?
I think it's a super creative way of approaching it and diversifying their investment in Valorant. I mean, this is actually one of the really cool things that we learned going forward, at least when we approached it. So prior to the beta even launching, we met with over like 120 organizations, talked to them about our high-level plans. We really tried to explain what to expect so they could plan accordingly. And at the end of the day, we had these really cool questions like, hey, what if we have 2 teams? What if we had one team in one region, another team in another region? And so it's really caused us to sort of stay on our toes and make sure that we just stay in constant communication so that teams can explore and invest in their own way. But overall, we think it's good for the scene to get this kind of creativity.
I know the big debate right now is, what will a Riot involved ecosystem look like for Valorant? Some people are saying maybe it's the League of Legends model. Some people are saying maybe it's the tournament model. What can you tell us? I know it's still early, but what can you tell us about the future of Valorant competitive?
You're going to see tournaments. I mean, it's certainly, I think, even in League of Legends, right? Like calling it the League of Legends model, there's still tournaments, and those are still our tentpole events where you can sort of bring people together from around the world and join in competition, and we love that. I think that that's probably the most common question we get asked, which is will there be a franchise league or a League of Legends model right off the bat? And I think the answer is nothing's off the table long term, but short term we think community events, tournaments, a nice healthy mix of the two. Trying to work with third parties to give them licenses, so it's not a totally chaotic ecosystem, but it still has the opportunity for creativity and exploration. Is the right approach, because long term it'll sort of raise the ceiling of what the sport can be.
Do you have an idea, even if you're not able to tell us right now, do you have a roadmap in your head on what Valorant competitive will look like in, say, 2 to 5 years?
5 years is a long ways out. We're going to learn a lot of stuff in the next
Okay.
18 to 36 months. I'd say that we're right now, just candidly, we're planning what our 2021 structure is going to look like. There's a lot of speculation, but we've been very open with the teams we've met with. There will involve tournaments. It'll be structured around tournaments, and ideally have a strong grassroots component as well, to ensure that amateur teams can really get their shot and get the chance to discover the next like set of pros, the next faker, if you will. Um, and then beyond that, who knows? I think we have to balance having an open ecosystem with an ecosystem that has stability, where the quality of life of a pro is really high. And so there's a lot of things that we're going to have to balance. But I think our hope is in the first sort of 12 to 18 months to really go with tournaments, go with community, and learn a lot, so that we can sort of iterate and plan over the next few years. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't tell you what is 5 years out. If you know, please let me know. That would be great. It'd make my life a whole lot easier. So we have a million scenarios on the wall that we're considering.
I think a lot of people are just assuming, because it's Riot Games, that it's a foregone conclusion that we might just go to a franchising model, right? Just because of how successful League of Legends is. But let me ask it this way, like, can you confirm that at least that decision, or has that decision already been made? Or are we looking at the next year as sort of a test to see how competitive will look?
So I can confirm that no decision has been made on like both the structural calendar of what the sport will look like, as well as the relationship between publisher teams and pros, because they're separate, right? You can have a franchise system, but without necessarily having leagues. I think the two are often equated and tied together, because that's what we've done with League of Legends, and I think that's sort of and then you have Overwatch, and so I think that you know, our goal though, long term, is to have a competitive structure that fans love to watch. I think without that, no sport's going to survive. And then beyond that, we also want some sort of structural relationship with the partners who invest in the sport long term, because we do believe that the people who invest long term in our sport should actually reap the rewards as well. In League of Legends, that was done via a franchise model, right? There are more options at our fingertips than just a franchise model for Valorant going forward. We've learned a lot of pros and cons of a franchise model, pros and cons of a league model, and so yeah, franchising is not off the table. There's a bunch of different ways to get the sort of long-term alignment and the long-term payoff that we want. But at the end of the day, we're going to pick the structure that ultimately is best for fans, because they will essentially determine whether or not Valorant is going to be a long-term esport or not.
Well, this actually ties in nicely to a question from chat from actually one of our own, Emily Rand, who's one of our goats here at ESPN
Hi,
Esports.
Emily.
She asks, "Hi, Emily. What was the number one lesson you learned or mistake you made from League of Legends esports that you think you can apply to Valorant esports?"
That's a great question. Look, I think we're coming about our 10th year, our 10th Worlds this year, and so we've had the chance to make a lot of mistakes on League as it's grown. I think one that I personally regret and wish we could have sort of wound it back is the just collaborating with teams and partners a lot earlier on in the process. I think we sort of kept a sort of arm's length approach until we were franchised, and I think we just cost ourselves a couple years of building the collaborative muscle of what it means to work with third-party teams and what third-party organizers, and trying to be good partners in that sense. And I think that we've made progress. And I think if you look at the LEC, the LCS, the LPL as well, you have a lot of like really healthy relationships between Riot and the teams that we work with. But we sort of made the decision, looking back, saying, hey, let's franchise first, and then let's raise the collaborative bar. I think we could have actually started earlier, and I think we'd just be a little bit more ahead of where we are right now. And so, sorry, just to answer that question, how have you applied it to Valorant? I mean, we've been talking to teams before the beta even came out, and that for us was putting a lot of trust into the teams that we could share early information that was not even half baked, just early on, like just morsels of ideas, and then learn and listen to them. And I think that we've probably learned just as much from them as they did from us, about the challenges that they faced in other esports, what they'd like to see out of Valorant, and how we can help them invest in Valorant, because there's a lot of excitement. And common question is how can we best invest for the future, and we want to help teams have confidence in their investment. It's because we want to be good partners.
Do you have a number in terms of what the competitive minimum age will be?
We're actually working on that right now. I think the goal is there's like a myriad of challenges around setting a universal number, with labor laws differing across countries, and you have sort of different age ratings for the game across countries as well. Our hope is that we can keep it as low as possible, so it's not actually an obstruction to aspiring pros. But at the end of the day, you have to balance what's sort of legally allows us to set up a real pro infrastructure versus having the ability to sort of let the younger aspirational generation compete. So that's sort of TBD. We hope to have that figured out in the next couple of months, but it's pretty complex because the game hasn't yet launched. Right, we're close, but the game hasn't launched, and there's some information we still need that's sort of being locked down.
Do you have a number you're hoping for?
It's 17 for league. We could it be 16 potentially, maybe a little bit younger, but I think that realistically speaking, it'll be either be 17 as well, or maybe 15 or 16. But we're trying to explore whether or not we can get it lower than 17.
Okay. Joined by Whalen Rozelle, who is the director of esports on the Riot Games Global Esports team, handling all things Valorant, also TFT, by the way. So you're a pretty busy guy, especially right now with the launch of Valorant. One thing I talked with Joe about, which I find a very fascinating topic, is just the difficulty of finding sponsorships and mainstream appeal for an FPS title, right? Like just the idea that there's guns in the game will always create some sort of controversy. But with that said, Valorant has been very good to make it as friendly as possible given the environment. Being able to remove blood, for example, is a great example of this. The aesthetic of it even is more pleasing than what you would see perhaps in Call of Duty, which is more realistic and more military in presentation, right? So how do you believe the esport will develop from a sponsorship and a mainstream acceptance perspective?
You nailed the premise, right? Which is one of the number one pieces of information that was given to us by teams, is that they've been frustrated at how challenging it is to monetize around other FPS esports. And they'd like us to do whatever we can to ensure that it's a game that's not just going to be widely played and watched, but also monetizable. And so, that's what led us to a decision of having, making sure the default was no blood, and really, I think the development team has been fantastic, and they sort of walk this line between keeping it stylish and accessible and appealing, while also just making it more approachable, right? And I think this is a good thing for everybody, because it's such a wonderful genre to play and watch, and but it can often be intimidating to just try to just download it, install, or even watch the game. And so I think we're trying to walk that fine line. And so far, the feedback's been pretty positive in terms of at least the levers that we've pulled. And we're sort of always exploring how can we make it so that sponsors who want to invest, who want to actually be a part of the scene, have a path to do so, and we can make them feel good about it.
Yeah, it's like it's not a bomb, it's a spike. The aesthetics of it, the blood, etc. I'm wondering. What has been you've mentioned a little bit of the feedback from the teams and the major organizations. I'd love to hear just generally what their thoughts have been when you speak with them, and how often you've been speaking with them. We've seen a lot of communication between developers and blog updates, etc. That communication has been great. What has your communication been like with the executives of teams, and what have those conversations been like?
It sort of varies based on the regions of how often it happens. We sort of did this big pass in March where we went and talked to owners in as many regions as we could, especially the ones that were launching for beta. And I think that follow-up conversations has sort of depended on the questions that have popped up, but we sort of keep an open dialogue as much as owners want to. And I think that if you talk about like the biggest piece of feedback, what's exciting for us is one of the biggest pieces of feedback we actually got early on was, hey, we know you want to take this nice and slow approach, but we think this is an awesome opportunity and we want you to do more. So that, that's a positive, that there's excitement and a desire to invest. And as well, I think understandably so, a lot of not so much concerns as just there's a lot of curiosity around what sort of long-term financial structure that we're going to set up, so that when they do invest, what is the payoff for that investment? And that's something that's top of mind for us as we think about this, because again, one thing that we've learned over the course of those 10 years is that it's not just about Riot and fans winning, it's about everyone who's sort of associated with the ecosystem, everyone who's invested in it, making sure that they win as well. And our thesis right now is like we want partners to invest to feel amazing about it, whether they're a sponsor or a team. And so that's caused us to maybe not necessarily accelerate plans so much as making sure we firm up in all around our planning, so that we can communicate it out earlier and give the teams as much information as they can have, so they can plan better around it.
This is another question from Chad, and this is sort of veering off topic, but I don't think we got a full answer on this. Is this going to be a region lock once it releases? Do you know? Can you tell us?
Like region lock in terms of esports.
Well, that and also just gameplay.
Oh yeah, I think there's, practically speaking, there's going to be servers, and you'll have to play on servers, and I'm not sure about like the what can and can't transfer across servers, but I'm pretty sure there's reasons around it. I would refer you to the devs, and we can hook you up with
Okay,
someone
fair
who can
enough.
get that answer. But from an esport perspective, we are exploring what, not necessarily just looking at these, the traditional League of Legends shards to be like, these are the server and the regions for Valorant, but what would, say, like a pan regional grouping look like? What are the pros and cons of having that? And so we're really not trying to constrain ourselves too much by what we've done for League of Legends, trying to just really bring those learnings across, take what's worked well, try to see if it could work within Valorant, but not be constrained by what we've done in the past tactically.
So credit where credit is due. When Valorant was even announced, a lot of people were saying, with Riot's backing and Riot's pedigree with League of Legends, both as a game and also as an esport, the way that it has captured the entire world, East and West, Valorant is in a fantastic position to be able to do this as well, right? And when I say this, I mean China. Obviously, China is not going to be part of the launch, but it is part of the plans, right? So how does that work for you as an esport? How does the negotiations with China go down? How do you establish Valorant as an esport in China?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to get the game launched in China, and I think until that happens, we really can't do a whole lot. And I think we just want to be super respectful of the sort of submission process there, and we're being as open as we can with those teams, with kind of what's going on in the rest of the world, and they're getting as much information as other teams get, so that they can make their plans accordingly. But I think it's in everyone's best interest to just try to get the game launched and see how it does. So yeah, China's always a tricky subject, but again, we hope it's going to be successful there. I think that'd be a key part of making what we hope Valorant could be, sort of a global FPS shooter, and I think that would make it, a great esport as well.
How important is that region for the success of the esport overall?
I think it's pretty important.
Yeah.
Just I think that you don't have to have the game and the sport be big there to be successful, but I think it unlocks another tier that you can see what it does for League of Legends. I think it unlocks another high height of what an esport could get to, and we have the hope that Valorant is a game that can be appealing, not just across markets, but a sport that appeals across markets as well.
Okay. Let's talk about the immediate future. Obviously, tomorrow, Twitch Rivals, massive event. Twitch Rivals has been doing great events with Valorant. They've been a lot of fun to watch. Whatever you can tell us, I know that people like to keep surprises, but maybe there's something to break here, maybe there isn't. But what projects are in the works, or even more generally, how often can fans expect to see tournaments happen in Valorant in the next 6 to 8 months?
See a lot of Valorant tournaments over the next 6 to 8 months. I think we don't want to. We want to make sure that the tournaments don't happen at the same time, so you have to choose between the two. We think that's a big part of what we can do as stewards of the ecosystem, is make sure that if someone is throwing a licensed tournament, that it can get its time in the sun, and it can get sort of be the focal point of the community. And we love Twitch Rivals as well. I think a diversity of the type of competition that you see is always nice, but at the end of the day, look, I'm biased. I'm an esports team. We love like legitimate club-based competition as well. And so you're going to see a lot of that. And our hope is essentially to channel all this energy and desire to invest in Valorant into a, you know, a healthy amount of competition for not just for people to play and for people to watch. And so I think you should expect something coming up pretty soon on that. I mean, I hate announcing the announcement, but yeah, we hope to give that information out pretty quickly to players and fans, because we know that there's this question about, cool, you guys are doing Twitch Rivals, are you doing anything else? And the answer to that is yes, we're going to do a lot more. And so stay tuned, TM, for that.
And is it going to be tournaments of all shapes and sizes? Are we expecting large prize pool, even amateur tournaments? How will that all shake down?
I think that there'll be certain constraints that we're naturally going to face given the fact that we have to play online, and so we can't do the big, international LAN events until we actually have the ability to do international travel or LAN events at all. So I think that you're going to see online events for practically speaking most of 2020. But our hope is to see a wide range of competition, but inclusive of competitive events where you see some of the teams that are really starting to make a name for themselves in beta get the chance to compete more frequently. We think that'll be a good thing for everybody.
Is it going to be a standardized rule set, or are you imposing anything from the Riot side, or are you letting TOs get creative with their tournaments? How will that shake down?
We're going to put some broad guidelines in place, again, just to make sure that nothing gets too wacky.
Okay.
Right? Like, I'm not interested in particularly in a best of 11, for example.
Okay, fair enough.
But and then but at the end of the day, I think that one of the advantages of having a community first model is allowing for some of that creativity and letting some of the TOs play jazz, and maybe they'll experiment with something that is a hit and we can explore it as something we hadn't considered before. I think it's a big part of what accelerates the evolution of an esport, by allowing more and more brains to sort of get involved.
Will you be upset if I go to my bosses and pitch a ESPN Esports knife fights, where it's just knives? That's it. They just meet in the center of the map and just knife it out.
Watch. I think the temptation to pull out a ghost and pop someone is going to be a little bit too much for me to necessarily do.
No one's gonna follow the rules. It's gonna like completely dissolve. I think it'd be funny.
Yeah, just like you see the Sage just dropping slows in the middle of a knife fight would be the most boring thing you'd ever see.
Oh wait, yeah, abilities enabled or not? Is it just straight up knife fight, or is it you can use your abilities? Oh, that's interesting.
I think it has to be to be abilities, because other than that, I mean, literally, I don't know if you tried to. I'm not good at this game, to be clear, but like I've tried to knife people just to be swag, and it's never worked out well. Right? There was that clip, I think you like that Raze clip where she does like the double C4 jump around the edge and like knife someone who's actually planting. That was the coolest thing in the world. And I'm like,
yeah.
I can't do that. That's like it's like when I first saw the Lee Sin kick, it's like I just can't actually do that. I don't have the ability to do that. But
No kidding.
I think that's actually one of the reasons we love this game, is that it skill, the creativity and the stylishness, but also like the easy way to demonstrate skill. And it's like, oh, that's cool, right? I think those moments are going to be really important for us to like sort of distinguish ourselves as an esport. It's going to be fun to see what people come up with.
Yeah, definitely. I know you don't want to reveal any secrets on what may be coming, but maybe tell us about the response from tournament organizers or people wanting to put on Valorant tournaments. What's that response been like?
I mean, it's been generally positive, just because they still want to, so that's great. I think, I mean, look,
is there a large volume? Is there a lot of people knocking on the door saying, "Hey, we want to put on a tournament"?
Yeah, there's been a pretty large volume. I think the talking, I don't want to say everything's just great, because look, we know that we're not there as an esport. Like, for example, we know that the spectator tools are tough, right? There's this is like a V, not even a V1, it's like a V0, right? Of where we are at. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done behind the scenes, a lot of foundational work to just enable the community to be at its best, right? Enable tournament organizers, whether it's data or observer tools. There's a lot that we're going to do. And what's been fantastic is, I mean, you guys were talking to Anna and Joe earlier, like those two are huge fans of esports and they know just how important it's going to be for Valorant. And so that's one thing that's, I think if you look at what's been different from League and Valorant, is that from before the game's even launched, right? We have the esport team collaborating with the game dev team super strongly, and there is no question of like, should we invest in this thing or not? We're all in, and so it's just a matter of like prioritizing those tools, understanding what are the things that are critical to deliver right away, what are some aspirational things that hasn't been invented yet that we can potentially develop to push FPS spectating forward. And so those are, I mean, I think if there's one piece of critical feedback we've been given is like, hey, the tools just aren't there for a TO to really make the game sing. And frankly, we agree, and we're going to have to work on that.
And that's something that is being worked on. Like there's going to be in 6 months, the observer tool, for example, will look much different than it does today.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
gosh, I hope so. But yes, it is. It is like there is a team working on it. We are exploring like what not as what not just what is it going to look like 3 6 months from now, but what will it look like 2 years from now, and then work backwards from there. So we're really trying to both think short term of like, here are the things that we really need to get in that are no brainers, but also like what could potentially be some creative stuff that hasn't been tried yet. And so like, that all that stuff is in progress. And a lot of people ask, hey, what do we do? In addition to working with tournament organizers, there's a lot of foundational work that goes into building a sport, and we're doing a lot of that.
Whalen, we only scratched the surface here. I know we're pressed up against it in time, and you've been very gracious with yours. I know what it's like to have kids screaming in the background, so I sympathize 100%. But we're gonna have to talk again off stream, in different content, because it's gonna be very interesting for you in the next several months as Valorant Esports continues to grow. Thanks so much for being generous with your time today.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone watching. Really excited for this launch. It's gonna be the beginning of a journey.